Hello, my name is Jason Johnson, and thank you for watching my videos. I hope you find that they're helpful, and thank you for subscribing to my channel. If you have any questions or feedback, you can leave a comment below, and I'll try to answer as quick as possible or point you in the right direction. This video is going to cover Netacad Essentials, or the Cisco Netacad IT Essentials, Chapter 5, Windows Installation. Now, what we're going to do in this video is I'm not going to show you how to install Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1, or Windows 10. This video is going to cover just the material for the course. When you're in your course, your instructor will provide, you're going to be doing hands-on labs on installing Windows, and I may in the future put some links in the description below on some videos that I create on how to install the various operating systems, including how to do Linux and Ubuntu or some Kali Linux or some other Linux versions, and doing that. And maybe even I'll do a video on how to get the get some other operating systems up and live. But just check the description out if they have those. If you're still wondering about those, just leave a comment in the description below, and I'll get back with you on when I put those links in. Okay, so on Windows installation, we're going to cover two different main topics: modern operating systems, explain how operating system requirements, what they are, and then we're going to look at 5.2 operating system installation, install a Microsoft Windows operating system. Now, again, this video is not going to cover actually how to do that, but we're going to talk about the whys and some of the pitfalls and some of the things that we look at when we're doing that. So in modern operating system, when we're looking at terms here, when we're describing an operating system, we're talking about a multi-user, multitasking, multiprocessing, and multi-threading. Those are some of the terms that are used with an operating system. And most common operating systems that we're working with today, and this is spring of 2017, March of 2017, we are working with Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, and then if you are in a workplace that might have a Linux operating system, you might be running in a Linux that's only running a command line. You may be working with an Apple systems, with Apple iPads or Mac devices, some along those lines like that. But the bulk of, or the large percentage of operating systems that are in use today are the Windows platforms. And so that's what we're dealing with. So that's some of the terms that you're gonna look at is multi-user, multitasking, multiprocessing, and multi-threading. And you need to have a good understanding of what those are, because those will be on test material. Now, when we're talking about the OS, what is an OS? It's an operating system, and some basic functions of an operating system, or really at its core, what an operating system does, it allows a user to communicate with hardware. So we know that we have hardware. You have a motherboard, you have a hard drive, you have a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse. Well, those things don't do anything unless you have some way to communicate with them. So we communicate with them with software. We write code to be able to perform some kind of function to tell them to do something, because otherwise it would just be a doorstop. You would just have a piece of metal and wires and metal and things like that. So the operating system, or those commands, tell that hardware to do something. It tells it to do a calculation. Let's say that you're going to use your calculator and you're going to add up 2 plus 2, or you're going to record a video, or you're going to watch a video, or you're going to play a video game, or you're going to do something else. Open a spreadsheet, for example. That's what the operating system does for you. It provides a communication to the hardware, and that's what we're looking at here in this image. You have the user, you have your applications, and there is a clear distinction between what an application is and what an operating system is, and you need to know that distinction. That an operating system is what lays on top of the hardware and tells it what to do. It gives it instructions. The applications are not necessarily required to make a computer run. The applications are things like a browser, for example, to be able to browse websites. That's an application. A spreadsheet, if you have a spreadsheet or a word processing program, that's an application. Those are not required to boot up and run a computer, but those are required to do some other type of function or application. And that's the reason we have the word application. So when we're looking at the basic functions of an operating system, we're looking at a couple different things here. We have hardware access. The operating system provides us access to the hardware. It allows us to make it do something. We have file and folder management, so we can move files around, we can save files. We have some kind of interface. whether we have a command line interface, which is, if you remember back to, in fact, let me just put a couple of these on the screen for you. I'm going to pause here and be right back with a couple of images on the screen for you, which will help you. Okay, so I just put a command line on here. I just opened up a command prompt here, and this is the command prompt window. And you can go to Windows and type CMD, and you will pull up a command prompt, and that's just provides you access to type in command lines or commands directly to the operating system. Okay, so let's close that down there. And we also have application management. The operating system allows an application to be installed on top of it or inside of it, and then that application then can do something. We also have the processor architecture. It does affect, or the type of processor does affect the performance of the computer. Let's say an older processor that doesn't have as fast of instructions, or it doesn't operate as fast, doesn't calculate as fast, is going to be a little bit slower than a faster computer. And just to give you a little bit of history, when I was in the Marine Corps back in the late 1980s, we had a computer that would boot up, and we would turn the power button on, and it was not a graphic. It was just a DOS. It was IBM DOS boot up, but it was slow. We could turn it on, go get a cup of coffee, and then come back by the time it was ready to start operating. It was just extremely slow compared to standards of today. But when it was new, it seemed fast. But then as newer computers come out, they seem slow to us because it's just a kind of a perception. So when we're talking about performance and speed and different things like that, different processors have different performance on a computer. So you just have to keep that in mind, whether depending upon which type of CPU you put in and how fast it is and the type of architecture that it's built on. So let's look at the desktop operating systems here. And the desktop operating systems are primarily designed for a small office, home office, or a SOHO, and they support a single user, usually. You have a single person that works on there. You don't have a lot of different logons. You have shared files and folders on a small network with a limited security. And then usually those consist of Microsoft Windows. You have Apple Linux, or you have a Linux operating system. Now, Windows and Linux and Mac do allow you to have multiple users on those operating systems, but you don't have logins through a network. You don't have network management of those users. Those are all managed singly on a one desktop. So if you have three different users, let's say you have user A and user B and user C, each one of those users are going to have an account on that computer or on that operating system, and it's all going to be managed locally. So when you move to network operating systems, those do have features that increase functionality, such as you can log on to, let's say there's 5 computers in your network. You can log on to any one of those different 5 computers and you can get your files. You don't have to create a user on each one of those computers to be able to access it, because what happens is your login information is contained on the network operating system or some server setting somewhere, and then that gets passed down through a profile. That supports multiple users. Many different types of users can be set up on there. And it provides increased security compared to a desktop operating system because the credentials for the login are maintained on the server and not on the local desktop. So if somebody picked up that local desktop and stole it, they're going to get the files that are located on there, but they may not get the login credentials. And again, I'm going to put the caveat of depending upon the security that's in place and depending upon the type of operating system. So when we look at operating system compatible applications and environments, before looking at an operating system, the technician must do a few different things. You have to take some things into consideration. The first is budget constraints. Does your company have budgeted for that operating system? When you buy a computer, it's not just the computer hardware that you're purchasing. You also need to buy the operating system and the software that comes along with it, or those applications. So you need to look at the budget and see what's allowed. You need to learn how the computer is going to be used. This is a big one here. You need to do some discovery. And I'll give an example. If you have a user that's only going to be on the internet, browsing the internet, and maybe doing some banking, let's just say that they're going to get on Facebook. They may do some Facebooking. They may do some online shopping, and then they're going to be, keeping their checkbook. And they don't really run any graphic-intensive programs. They're not going to need a computer that's high-end. They're not going to need a lot of memory. They're not going to need a big hard drive for a lot of storage space. Versus a user that may be playing video games, a video game user is going to need a graphics processor that's on the high end, or they'll want that on the high end. If you've got somebody that's doing video and photography, they're going to need more hard drive space. So you're going to need to look at those needs and look at the cost and see how those are going to work on there. So then you're going to need to determine which types of applications will be installed. What's going to be used, or how much memory do those programs take. And then you need to determine if a new computer needs to be purchased, or can you take the current computer and just upgrade it. Maybe a current computer that they're using you can add some more RAM, maybe put an SSD drive into it, and it'll work just fine. Now, when we're looking at the minimum hardware requirements and compatibility with an operating system, what you have to do is look and see the minimum versus the recommended. And so the minimum operating requirements say that these have to be met. For example, an operating system may say that you need 4 gig of RAM, and you need at least 150 meg of hard drive, or let's say 2 gig of hard drive space is more likely. So you need 4 gig of RAM and the hard drive space. So those applications are going to have specific requirements. They're also going to have specific hardware requirements. It may say that you need a particular piece of hardware to run on there. Upgrades may be necessary to your current computer. You may need to put more RAM in. You may need to upgrade your hard drive and put a different hard drive in. So you may need to put another video card in. And then the best place when you're dealing with Microsoft is check the Microsoft Compatibility Center. That can be a good resource, and I'll put a link in the description below for that. You can go in and look for the compatibility on those components in your hardware to see if that's going to match the operating system that's going to be installed. So we're going to check the operating system compatibility. A new version of an operating system brings a lot of new functionality and better performance. However, older hardware may be dropped from that list and it may not work with the new operating system. So new hardware may be required. You need to check the operating system compatibility before upgrading the operating system, because you may run into a problem. You may purchase the operating system and find out the hardware doesn't work. And the Microsoft Upgrade Assistant and Upgrade Advisor can be helpful tools as well. And again, I'll put those links in the description below. Now, when you go to do an upgrade, upgrades may be faster than performing a full install. You get to maintain your files, and it's in some cases easier. In other cases, if you have some issues with your current operating system, or there's something, you might need to clean up your hard drive and delete some files, things like that. So in some cases, it's better just to wipe the hard drive and start over, or put a new hard drive in. In other cases, an upgrade does make more sense for you. Now, another consideration is when you're installing an upgrade, you have to look at your current operating system to see if it can be upgraded. You can't jump from, for example, you cannot upgrade a Windows 90, let's go back to Windows ME that we don't really talk about. Let's go way back to a Windows 2000 operating system. You can't directly upgrade that to a Windows 10. It just doesn't, there's no upgrade path for that. So you need to make sure that there is an upgrade. For example, I upgraded my Windows 7 machine up to a Windows 8, and then I upgraded it to a Windows 10, so I had that upgrade path for it. So the last thing on that, though, is you want to make sure that you have good, full data backups on your files before you do some type of upgrade, because you just don't know if something's going to go wrong. And so you want to make sure you have a good backup on that. You also want to check and make sure that your backup was good. You don't want to just assume that it backed up and those files are okay on there. You can also do a data migration. It needs to be transferred after a new installation. Those are files that you did to the backup or you saved and you bring them back over. And you can use there's a user state migration tool and a Windows Easy Transfer tools, and those are good for moving files onto a Windows system. Okay, let's take a look at the operating system installation itself. As far as notes on that. And when you're installing that, you have the storage device types that you're going to put in. You need to make a determination on if you're going to use SSD drives or if you're going to use the older magnetic drives. Are you going to have USB flash drives for extra storage? You just need to, or you're going to put the eMMC cards in. So you just need to make those determinations before you start trying to install, because you need to have all that set up beforehand. Then you're going to go through hard drive partitioning. And what partitioning does is it just takes pieces of the hard drive and it sets them aside. It says, okay, this location is going to be set for the boot partition, and this location is going to be set for files. You make logical divisions on a disk, And then the proper partitioning is crucial for a correct boot process. Usually this process is fairly straightforward, but what you're going to learn in this course is the process on what you're going to do to set up the, if you look down here, we've got separate partitions and we've got different primary partitions on there. And depending upon your needs, if you're going to do a dual boot with another operating system, you need to set aside hard drive space, things like that. File systems, how you set your file system up, different ones have different types of setup, whether it's going to be a FAT32, which is for an older operating system, or whether you're going to use NTFS or exFAT or NFS. If you're moving over to the Linux operating systems, you're going to have file systems over there as well that are a little bit different. These are common ones supported by the Windows-based operating systems. And so you just need to make that determination of which type of file system you're going to use on there. Now, when we do the operating system installation, we can do it with just default settings. We can just go through and just do default, but experienced users, or once you've read up and you know that you want to make some changes, you're going to make changes in there and you're going to do different settings and things like that. The default settings allow for very little, they do not have much customization on there. And so Windows does allow what we call granular customization after the default setting installation is complete. So you do the default setting, you get your blank copy on there, or you get your initial copy on there, and then you could go back through and make your customization. And then you're going to do an account creation. You're going to create an account on that operating system. User accounts do allow for multiple users to share a computer so that you can have your own file areas, you can have your own programs installed, things like that. The common Windows account types are administrator, standard, and guest. How I typically set up my computers is I create an administrator account, I put a good password on there, and I don't use that account. And then I have my standard user, which is myself, and I set that up on there, and then I have so that it's got limited access. And then if I need to install anything, I think I can upgrade or log in as administrator or give administrator rights to do that. And then I usually don't have guests logging in, but if I did have this computer setting somewhere where I needed to have somebody come in that I don't really know on a daily basis, but they're just going to need to borrow the computer and use it, then you have guest accounts set up. And then finally, we finalize the installation. We use the Windows Update to check for updates after the installation is complete. So we go through and we do a Windows Update. We get all the latest patches because you might have purchased that operating system off the shelf or you've downloaded it digitally, and that copy is probably not up to date. In fact, I'll almost say most of the time, and I'm going to make a general statement here, but most of the time that operating install that you do is going to need some type of updates to it. And then you need to use the device manager to verify that all the hardware was properly installed. You go through and you check to make sure, did the sound card get installed properly? Did the printers that you've attached, things like that, are all operating on there. Now, what you can do is after the installation, you go through and you can do disk cloning. Disk cloning allows for you to get a good installation made. You know all your settings are on there, and then you make a copy of it, and then you take that copy to other hard drives. It does speed up bulk installations. It uses a single OS installation as a base system to create multiple clone systems. And then what you do is after you put that clone in, let's say you've got drive A with operating system, you make a clone of that. And then on clone B, then you go in and change your information to make sure that it's verified. That it's got a different code on there to be able to verify that it's a genuine purchase. There's other installation methods that you can do. There's a network installation, image-based installation, where you can push images across a network. I've done those a few different times in my career, and those are handy to be able to use. And then you also have a Windows Advanced Startup option. You can refresh your PC, which with Windows 8X, those allow you to or fix things with your operating system. You can do system restores, upgrades, remote network installation, recovery partitions, things like that. And then on a network installation, it relies on a good network connection to deploy the installation files. And you can do remote network installation and unattended installation, so that if you need to do an upgrade or something like that, or do an installation, it's the person on the computer doesn't see what's happening. It's all quiet, or what we say quiet, where it doesn't show anything happening. Now the restore. Let me get back on the right screen there. Restore, refresh, and recover. There are some tools to perform custom installation. Those are Windows System Restore, Windows Refresh, and Windows Recovery Partition. On the system recovery options, you can use to recover after a system failure. That's usually going to be later on when you're doing your your troubleshooting steps, that's not the first option that you go to. The system recovery is something that you do closer to the end when you have not been able to find anything else to fix things. What you can do is you go into advanced startup, and there's recovery tools. They're different for Windows 8X versus Windows 7 and Vista. And then you recover to a factory recover partition, and basically you're resetting your operating system. Now, the Windows boot process, let's talk about this real quick and then we'll wrap up the video here. The Windows boot process, there are common boot steps. You have your post-execution after the hardware does its BIOS and then passes it over to the post-execution. It locates and loads the CMOS, and then the boot loading takes place, and it locates and then boots up the operating system. So the Windows bootloader and Windows Boot Manager are programs used to manage Windows startup. So you have the hardware boot does its BIOS, and then it passes it over to post, it loads the CMOS, and then Windows takes over, and there's a boot process that happens, and then after that boot process, the Windows operating system takes over. Now, you have different startup modes on your Windows system. There's some that allow for troubleshooting when Windows fails to start properly, and those are where it loads and it doesn't load everything up. You've got a safe mode. You've got a safe mode with networking. Safe mode loads the bare minimums. There's not a lot of drivers that are loaded. It doesn't load networking capability, things like that. Safe mode with networking loads a little bit more. It does allow you to get onto a network so that if you need to pull some network files down or do some troubleshooting that way. You do safe mode with command prompt so that you can get a command prompt and do some command line instructions. And then you do a last known good configuration. And the LKGC, or the last known good configuration, what it does is it says, okay, I know I booted 2 weeks ago on, and it's got a way of tracking it inside Windows operating system, and we don't really discuss that in this video. But it goes back to that install, and it says it restores everything back to that point. Now, the last term on this slide, we're going to talk about the Windows registry. Now, the Windows registry is all Windows settings are stored as key value pairs in the Windows registry. Caution needs to be taken when working with the registry because if you make a change on the registry, you can really mess your operating system up. So you really want to make sure you know what you're doing in the registry before you make changes in there. You always want to back registry keys up before you make changes to them. So if you're going to make a change or update something, back those registry keys up. We don't cover in this video how to do that, but there's other videos and there's other resources that'll show you how to do that. Now, the multi-boot process or multi-boot procedures, it is possible to install multiple operating systems on one computer. It's been my experience with multi-boot operating systems is that I put different operating systems on different hard drives. It just works a whole lot better for me, just from my personal experience. If I'm going to dual boot from a Windows and a Linux, I will usually put the Linux on a different hard drive. I don't try to put those on the same partition. There are disk management utilities that you can use that allow you to view the drives, the partitions, the split partitions, assign drive letters, things like that. When we're talking about partitions, you have logical partitions that are created inside a drive to host file systems, and they can be extended or shrunk using some type of disk management utility. And then when we do drive mapping or drive letter assignment, in Windows assigning drive letters to name physical or logical drives, it's called a drive mapping or drive letter assignment. Disk management utilities can be used to manage drive letter assignments. So you can put, if you wanted a drive letter D, for example, or a drive letter K, you could do that with your system. Now, when we set up our directory structures are set up to store files and folders. A disk must be initialized and formatting if Windows is not going to recognize it. And so it needs to be formatted so that Windows can see what's going on with it and can write to it. Formatting a disk partition creates a file system on there. And then formatted disk or partitions can be mounted before use. And when we talk about user and system file locations, there's different locations for user files versus system file locations. System files are critical to the operating system, and they need to be not locked, but they need to be protected so that changes don't get made to them or deleted. And then user files are those belonging to a particular user. Those are little significance to the operating system because the operating system does not need those to run, but they are of great significance to the user, but those are located in different spots on your operating system. Now, when we're talking about attributes, we have file extensions. They identify the file types in Windows and must adhere to Windows naming convention. File attributes define how files can be handled. For example, there's some things that you cannot put in a file name. There's certain characters that are not allowed. Let me back up. The attributes define how the files can be handled. For example, file attributes, you can have read, archive, system, and hidden. So if you put certain attributes on a file that hides it from users, or it allows it to be archived when it does a backup system. On application, file, and folder properties, when we're talking about folder properties, you can right-click on a file, application, or a folder to see the properties of it. And those are different. File properties are different than folder properties. You're going to have different properties on those, and you'll learn more about those in the course as you go along. Okay, so this has been Chapter 5, and in this chapter we've looked at different operating systems that are available to us. We've looked at considering the customer's needs and environments before choosing an operating system, and we've looked at preparing the drive, installing the operating system, creating accounts, and other types of installation options. So you're going to learn more about these in the course. I'm going to probably put video links in the description below at a later date, so check for those. And I hope this was helpful for you, and I hope you have a great day.